Today I'm actually quite happy to welcome someone who is not from Munich, whose entrepreneurial endeavor is actually not based in Munich, so that I can basically present to you and share with you a story of another hidden champion outside of our ecosystem. And I hope his story will provide some inspiration to all the first-time entrepreneurs around today. So who is this guest speaker? He's behind the name of the iconic, not sure you know of this one, but if I say it's the kind of Australian Zalando, then you're like, wow, okay, so big deal. What else? He brewed his own beer and came up with some bottles today. I hope you got already a taste of it. It's called Berg brewery. And finally, he's also the managing director of Movinga, and once troubled company that he turned around quite successfully in the last couple of months. So please welcome on stage Hänsel to share the story. So let's have a seat. Just for everyone's information, we're going to record this interview. So you are more than welcome to ask questions, but if you if you would like the truth about the story, then we can cut off the camera at the end. So for any confidential information, just wait a little bit. So Finn, welcome. Thanks a lot for coming all the way from Berlin, which is super far.
Thank you for being here.
To Munich. So tell me a little bit, you're behind this wonderful brands and entrepreneurial endeavors like the iconic Berg, Movinga. You also invested, I think, in CrossEngage, SMACC, Einhorn.
Yeah.
What drives this entrepreneurial spirit? Where did that come from? And especially, why did you go to Australia to discover your entrepreneurial mindset?
That's a good question. I'm definitely not from an entrepreneurial family. I'm actually the first man in my family for every generation that anyone knows of that didn't do engineering. Like my dad was an engineer, my grandfather was an engineer, my great-great-grandfather was an engineer, and my dad always told me when I was younger, when we went to Hamburg, which is the closest big city to where I'm from, maybe you know the fountain in the center of Hamburg, like in the harbor, like the water fountain. So that patent is done by my great-grandfather. And my dad always told me, look, you have a family full of engineers, one day you'll be an engineer too. Therefore he was quite disappointed when I decided to study business. But that was actually not really the driver of me being an entrepreneur. The biggest driver of me being an entrepreneur was actually when I did my high school exam, my Abitur in German, and we saw, each Abitur class is doing their own thing. They have their own magazine, they have their ball that they organize. And every year we went to these balls, even when we were still in school, and we thought it could have been done better. And when actually it was our task, and we were actually at the stage where we did our Abitur, me and my best friend back in the days, we said, let's do something big out of it. And we did something crazy compared to other classes. We went through the whole city of Flensburg and asked for sponsoring. And at the end, we almost had 50,000 euros in sponsoring for the ball, because everyone did an advertisement in our Abi magazine and everything. And at the end of the day, we had an amazing ball. It didn't cost anything for anyone. Free drinks, everything was free. It was super nice. And at the end, we even had 35,000 euros left that we then gave back to the
community.
Yeah, kind of. So. And that was the first time where I thought, wow, if you actually have an idea and you actually have the ambition to do that and you want to succeed and you actually have a plan in mind and you execute that plan, then you can really achieve something. And I think that was, first of all, probably the first time I really went into entrepreneurial thinking and thought that's kind of cool.
So you envisioned that entrepreneurial career, but from what I read, you actually didn't start as a founder. So you started at BCG. So can you explain to me the jump between entrepreneurial spirit and consulting?
Yeah, well, let's put it like this. I think this entrepreneurial spirit was always in me. However, being the typical German, we're also risk averse. So it means when you're done with your university and you think about what to do next, the first things you think about is, so what is cool, where do you earn money, what's the safe job? And being at BCG or McKinsey or Bain or you name it is actually a very good option after university, because one thing that I also had always at university, I never wanted to decide what I really want to do. So I always had all these ideas in my mind, but I was not really sure of what the right thing is for me to do.
It's like a little bit of a fear of missing out?
Maybe fear of missing out, yeah. But the nice thing at consulting is that you can postpone this decision. That actually, like, even in consulting, you don't have to decide if you want to do marketing or finance or controlling, because in consulting you do everything. And that's the reason why consulting was quite a good decision in the first place. However, the reason I left consulting was definitely because I had this entrepreneurial spirit in me. I saw a lot of people around me to live out that entrepreneurial spirit, and I, again, felt of missing out. So I decided to leave BCG at some point and join Rocket Internet in Australia, and then founded the Iconic.
Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. How did that come up? So this initiative or this opportunity to join the Rocket family, and why in Australia?
Well, it's an easy answer. So I was with BCG in Australia for the last year.
Okay.
I did a so-called ambassadorship. So if you decide not to do a PhD in a consulting company, especially BCG said, okay, instead of a PhD, we offer you ambassadorship, and then you can actually almost, if you want, pick a country where you want to go. And as long as someone is in that country who also wants to go to Germany, you can actually do an exchange for 1 year. So I decided to go to Australia, and I had a super cool time there. But during that time in Australia, I had a very crazy flatmate. He's actually based in Munich. He founded a company called 21 Diamonds. I don't know if any one of you guys know him. Moritz Werner. And he was my flatmate. So we were both at the same time at BCG. In Australia, we were both ambassadors. We were flatmates. And at some point, after half a year, he somehow in his mind made click and he decided, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I was still a standard BCG guy. I did my job. But I was very curious because every single night he was working until 4 a.m. in the morning, not on BCG projects, but sitting in his little room and hacking in his computer. And at some point I said, like,
20 diamonds.
21, yeah, but I didn't know it back then. I just asked him, like, what are you doing the whole day? Like, why are you up at night so long? And he said, like, look, I want to found my own business. I'm leaving BCG at some point, and I'm already working on my new business. So in half a year, when I leave BCG, I can start it. So then I became curious and said, like, wow, so what is it? What are you doing? Then he told me about 21 Diamonds. Back in the days, it was still called Les Facettes, with a French name. And I don't want to say I didn't like the idea, but it was probably not my thing to do. But I was very intrigued by everything that he was doing business plans, thinking about. Maybe a bit, yeah. Well, I was not jealous of his lifestyle, but I was kind of jealous.
Of the freedom that you get maybe in being an entrepreneur,
yeah.
Not having.
I was jealous about him creating his own thing.
Okay.
I like creating things, and that's the reason why I think, wow, he's creating something, and I'm just creating things for the drawer, for companies to take my advice and then take it to a drawer and never take it out again. So that's not really the
consulting, right?
Well, but that's a fact.
So Ollie Zamor called you then?
Well, that came later. So the first thing was that I have a good friend at BCG. He went to Zalando at some point, and he actually asked me if I want to join Zalando. And I went to Berlin, I looked at Zalando, and I thought, like, it's a great company, but if I really want to be entrepreneurial, Zalando's already too far ahead. I mean, they were back in the days already 3,000 people. So you're not really an entrepreneur if you start as an ex-BCG guy at Zalando when they already have 3,000 people.
So what you really wanted to achieve is starting something from scratch.
Yeah.
Like that's the what.
To be very honest, I think I didn't really know back in the days. I had something in my mind, but it was not really clear of what I really want. So I said no to Zalando. And another good friend of mine, who then became my successor at the Iconic later on, but that's a different story, also at BCG, he wanted me to become his co-founder at Groupon in Australia, because he came to Australia and founded Groupon. And I was still at BCG, and still I thought, like, no, Groupon is not the right thing, but as I said, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then came the famous call of Ollie Zamor, and he said, like, look, you're in Australia, you don't want Groupon, you don't want Zalando, what do you want? And then I said, well, I don't know. I want to create something, I want to do something cool. And then he came up with the idea of doing a fashion retailer in Australia. So it didn't have a name then. There was a small team of Rocket already thinking about the idea, some people on the ground who did something in China before. And that was the moment when I decided, yeah, it's cool. It's like I'm under 30, I get like the chance of doing something to become an MD and founder of a really cool company, and that was my first entrepreneurial moment actually, when I really started my own thing.
And what makes it different from Zalando then at the time? So because you were going to be like creating something new in a completely new market.
Well, first of all, you're completely independent. The thing was not called Zalando. The name was Open back in the days.
You chose the name with your co-founders?
Well, actually, I chose it together with my head of buying, who was back in the days the jury of Australia's Next Top Model. So she was kind of the Heidi Klum equivalent, and she decided to join us as the head of buying. But she had this crazy idea about like different fashion segments need different scenarios or like different kind of, she called it rooms, and that's the reason why this website could create different rooms for every fashion segment, and every room is iconic. And that's the reason why the first name of the company was The Iconic Room. But then everyone said like it's nonsense, like, it's a stupid name, why do you call it The Iconic Room? And then at some point we just got rid of...
It's too concrete.
Exactly, it's too concrete and like it's too much to explain. And at some point we got rid of the room, which was my idea. And then it was called The Iconic. It was my contribution to the name, exactly.
And how did you meet your co-founders?
So I actually worked with Adam and Cameron already at BCG in Sydney. So when I actually got the offer of founding something in Australia, Rocket asked me immediately like, hey, do you know other cool people that you like that you could imagine founding a company with? And Adam and Cameron were both BCG guys. The cool thing, Cameron just left BCG a year before, because he founded a private label company who created a private label fashion for Coles, big Australian supermarket chain. And Adam was just always like a very big logistics nerd at BCG. And I said, I love these guys, I always like working with them, and like, why not taking them over to The Iconic? And then at some point they both took over, came with us, and then another BCG guy, funny enough, from Germany that I knew very well, joined us as well as the buying lead. And then the four of us actually were running the company.
So it was not imposed to Ollie and by Ollie or the Rocket Internet. I don't know what the Rocket Internet setup is actually.
You know, it's like everyone said, like, what is the Rocket Internet setup? It's at the end of the day, it's very
like Ollie Schuler.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm looking at Matthias Müller now somewhere. At the end of the day, Rocket is probably the most opportunistic company you can think of. If they feel something could work, they immediately say go for it. So instead of like sending a team of co-founders that's already there and say like, hey, these are your co-founders, if you tell them like, hey, I have my own team and I want to bring my own people and here they are, it's even perfect.
Especially because the team is quite a strong component when you start a business.
Exactly.
And you have to have the right dynamics.
Yeah.
So, but still you have basically a salary, a little bit of equity, I guess, in the company. How do you pull this together? What do you do the first 100 days? Do you have a team behind you in the internet that is coaching you, telling you like how to do things, or how do you bridge the gap between being a consultant and setting up a new company?
I think I'm not kidding when I will tell you that the moment where I was most lost in my professional life was when I arrived at this empty warehouse in Sydney on my day one. And I saw 4 people from Denmark sitting there on camping tables, and I was actually entering this warehouse, and I told them like, look, you're the setup team, I'm the founder, and they looked at me and said, okay, what are we going to do? I was like, good question. So the thing is, like, the funny thing is when you come from consulting and suddenly are this kind of role, consultants are not used to make decisions, so they're always like, I'm more the risk-averse type who always say like, you know, you could do this, you could do that. Ideally, based on the numbers, you should do this. And then they crunch numbers for like 5 weeks, and then they have like a potential option that might be the best. And that's very different as a founder. You just come in and like people want to have your decisions all the time. So when my web designer came for the first time, it's like, so what's our color? Orange, green, or black? It's like, how do I know? And he's like, well, you have to decide. And I was like, well, do we have numbers? And then he said like, no, we don't. And then I said, okay, black. So, and that was like a really interesting moment because it was the first time that I really made a professional decision completely based on gut feeling, but it felt amazing. And I actually kind of loved it. And I think what really is cool when you were a consultant before and then you turn into entrepreneurship, that you kind of can combine gut feeling with numbers. So when you know it's necessary to do it, you crunch the numbers, you do the analytics, you do the decision based on that. But you also learn to like trust your intuition And you know when you have to be fast, you just take everything what's there and then you make the decision.
Yeah, the 80-20 rule. So
Exactly.
basically you're able to take many decisions quite quickly based on a limited overview of the reality.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's what basically you learned at BCG that you could transfer again into your entrepreneurial endeavor.
Yeah.
At
And excellent
Iconic. So
PowerPoint.
would you actually recommend to first-time entrepreneurs to start with consulting or start at least with a corporate job before founding their first business?
Nah.
Start right away.
Start
You don't
right
need
away.
BCG.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, if you really look at the founders of the first generation, especially in Berlin, almost all the founders that sounds a bit weird when I say it, but the founders that I grew up with in the ecosystem, they were all ex-BCG, ex-McKinsey. I mean, at the end, they were all starting at Rocket Internet. And I think that back in the days was really good because Rocket Internet was a very good ecosystem to take risk-averse people out of their risk-averse environment and then really push them for the first time to be entrepreneurial. And of course, not everyone worked in that scenario and in that new environment, but many did. And the ones that did were actually really good founders. And they really created the first generation of Berlin-based founders who are now actually angel investors, who are now actually like mentors to all these people. But I think now it's not necessary anymore. Now actually like you have a generation coming from university who see all these founders like the Robert Gens, who see like Florian Heinemann, and who see them and say like, wow, like I don't care if I wasn't consulting or not, I actually want to achieve the same thing like they do. And so they don't need this kind of nest before that they have a security and then go into entrepreneurship. They can go directly. And I would just recommend everyone, if you have an idea and if you think you can do it, and if you actually have also a bit of sales skills, if you don't have sales skills, you get a co-founder with sales skills, do it immediately, don't wait, don't waste your time in consulting.
I think having also a good network where you can ask and this mentoring that you were talking about is...
And also like it's always very unpopular when I say that, especially when I'm not in Berlin or not in Munich. I say like, don't try it in Cologne, don't try it in Düsseldorf. Go to Berlin, go to Munich, go to Hamburg. These are the only 3 relevant cities where you have the mentor network from scratch, where you have the investors network from scratch, where you basically have all the infrastructure that you need. Don't try because someone tells you, oh, we're a federal country, every little village should have a startup hub. Don't try it in Braunschweig or somewhere. Try it in Berlin, Hamburg or Munich, because the chances of surviving are the biggest when you have this network around you.
I'm sure you see
it also has downsides, but the upsides far outweigh.
Yeah, well, it's also like having access to talent and to investors.
Exactly.
Ecosystem. Looking back at the Iconic, so how did you actually kind of scale and reach critical mass? Because it's a pretty heavy fixed asset, fixed cost.
Yeah.
So can you tell us?
I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's almost the same in e-commerce as it is, for example, in a marketplace like Movinga. It's really a balance. So on the one hand, you have to generate the customers and you have to generate the demand, but on the other hand, you have to manage your supply. And I think especially in e-commerce, especially in fashion e-commerce actually, one of the biggest challenges, because you know the traditional way how fashion e-commerce works is that you have a team of buyers who buy the clothing and they completely decide based on gut feeling. You have like completely esoteric people who think like, oh, I think red will come this season. And then the next one say like, yeah, maybe red with a bit of green. And then you have to trust these people to make the right decisions for what will happen in 1 year from now. So I think that was the biggest challenge at the Iconic, to really actually make sure that the assortment that you picked, especially in the beginning, is the right assortment that actually matches the market.
But you have actually companies that are putting business model on this type of insights.
Yeah, but not 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Like Zalando was the first one who started with a smart buying strategy. Okay. You did, especially in Australia. Australia is a very old-fashioned market in these regards. You didn't have that back in the days, and that was really the challenge. Because, for example, I can tell you, as we all know, Rocket, they wanted to grow very quickly in the first year. Our assortment was complete shit. No one liked it. Everyone said like they have shit clothing. But still, of course, we needed to have like the revenue number going up. So you invest a lot of marketing to force people to buy your clothing, even though you know it's not very sustainable, because like you need to probably buy 100 people who visit your website to buy one piece of clothing, where if you would have done the right assortment, you would have only need to buy 10 people to go to your website to buy this clothing. So that actually was kind of like the biggest learning in the beginning. But then in the second season you learned, the third season you learned, Then at some point the smart technologies came in, so you created patterns, you understand trends, and then you can actually do very smart things on the way. But managing that and understanding your customer, and I always say, like, to every founder I meet, most important thing, understand your customer. Don't do anything that you think is cool, and don't, especially in Berlin, horrible. Everyone in Berlin thinks everything that happens in Berlin Mitte is the whole country. So just because you and your friends in Berlin Mitte think that one thing is cool, don't believe that actually it will be a big thing all over the world because your friends think it's cool. So always put yourself in the shoes of the customers and understand who your customers are and also which customers you need to actually become big. Only then you can really scale efficiently.
So you're a big fan of customer surveys and
Absolutely.
research, and you would advise first-time entrepreneurs to do this
Absolutely.
before they start building a product. Okay, so everything is going super well at the Iconic, you managed to scale, but then you still decide to come back to Germany. So can you explain to us a little bit the reason why, although like you liked what you were going to achieve there?
Well, you know, when I left the Iconic, I was in Australia for almost 4 years. And you know, Australia is the other side of the world. And at some point, apart from my professional mindset, there was the time when I had to decide for myself, where do I see myself in the future? Do I see myself in Australia, or do I see myself actually back in Europe? And the more I thought about it, the more I came to the conclusion that I want to be back in Europe, that my main friends are still there, my family is still there, and I know if I would have just stayed 1 or 2 more years in Australia, I was completely convinced that this would fade away, and at some point I would actually see my center in Australia, and I made the conscious decision that I don't want that. So that was number one. And then the second thing that happened over time was that all the small ventures of Rocket Internet who did fashion, in the beginning they were completely independent, and over time they were grouped. So for example, the Iconic was completely independent in the beginning, responsible for Australia and New Zealand. Then after 1 year or 1.5 years, they were grouped into the Zalora group, which was based in Singapore. So of course, some authorities and some reporting standards changed, and you were not as free as you were in the past. And then the third step was the Global Fashion Group was created, so there was another layer on top of that. And I don't want to say that was the main decision, but I had the chance at some point to go to Singapore and be in the headquarters of Zalora in a good position. But I didn't want to go to Singapore. I always loved Australia. It was always for me either Australia or home. And that's the reason why I decided to go back home.
So you're going back home, you want your freedom back, and you're joining Epic, which is kind of the incubator for ProSieben.
It was, yeah.
It was. What was the difference at the time between Rocket Internet and Epic? Because it's a very similar setup, like building companies, but how did you experience it?
Well, I think Rocket Internet was already a very stable, global acting company where everything was pretty much set in place, and you had the right people being responsible for the right things. They had a very stable, and they still have a stable MD team who was running the company. So it was not much innovation and not much dynamic in Rocket itself when I came back. And I decided to not join Rocket in Berlin and go to Epic because ProSieben really had this great idea of creating something like a new Rocket Internet. So they hired a bunch of Rocket people, including me, to run that incubator and to create Epic. And at the end of the day, it was really, we got from ProSieben and Einhorn the complete freedom. They said, like, look, go to Berlin, take the money, do cool startups, one after the other, we finance you. And that was kind of like a cool opportunity to do things. And I mean,
and to see things, right? To see innovative trends, products, what's ahead of the entrepreneurs.
Well, if you would ask me today, I think the things that we did were not that innovative, but just being a bit of self-critical. But I mean, still great things came out of that. I mean, Amorelie, everyone knows today, online love toys is like was the first investment of Epic companies. There are still like a few cool companies that actually like were founded in the incubator. And that was really cool because we can really decide ourselves what kind of models do we want to do. We could present them to the board of ProSieben, like the CEO and back in the days the CDO. They said yes, we got the money and we could get started. And that was something that was very different from Rocket because you still had this like startup spirit in that. And that was really cool, and that's the reason why I decided to join them.
And the model was a little bit different, right? You were getting money to do also TV advertising.
Well, I would almost say, and that was also probably the big fail within ProSieben, within Epic companies. ProSieben had the idea that you don't need anything else except for TV to make startups successful. So, for example, when
B2C startup.
Exactly, B2C, yeah, B2C startups. And the thing is, whenever actually suddenly the companies were short on money, the ultimate answer was always stop Google, stop everything else, just do TV. And of course, this didn't work. And also, back in the days, the clear objective of ProSieben was to strengthen its e-commerce portfolio. So they were really into e-commerce companies and really, I mean, I hope I can say that today, but I would say that ProSieben has a kind of trauma. And the trauma is that they were very early on board at Zalando. And ProSieben has the feeling that they are actually the main driver of Zalando's success because they made Zalando big and famous in the beginning. And they still have the feeling that they didn't get enough benefit out of that. So they got a bit of fame, but they didn't really get the financial expectations back that they probably expected. And that's the reason why they wanted to recreate Zalando. That was, I think, the underlying kind of like desire that was in there when they founded Epic. And the problem is only they didn't understand e-commerce. And they didn't understand that you need a lot of money to run warehouses, to buy products before the season, then that you need to sell these products, then you buy these products again. But it's a very like bad working capital cycle that you have. I mean, it's the same like in fashion. You always have to buy the clothing like almost 1 year up front, and then actually at some point the product drops and then you can start selling. And that's very expensive, and that's also very cash consuming. And I think that's something that was completely underestimated in the whole setup.
And so when did you realize this, and when did you actually start thinking, okay, this is not for me, I need something else?
At the end it was not only that. I mean, well, the story is that the whole incubator doesn't exist anymore. And it's not because I realized something or someone else realized something. I would say it's a combination of many different things. So during the time when Epic was at its peak, every venture we did cost a lot of money. That was just a fact. But at the same time, KKR was the biggest investor of ProSieben and Einhorn. And they were a very big fan of the digitalization strategy. So they wanted ProSieben to digitalize, to really invest in the future, because of course KKR wanted to increase the value of the company to make sure once they exit, actually they're in a good stage and have like a good potential like outlook in the future. So once KKR left ProSieben and sold their shares, ProSieben went back on the stock market, and suddenly the mindset shifted a bit away from we invest in the future, more towards like we take as much cash out of the company as possible now. So in terms of like prioritizing, they didn't prioritize anymore to necessarily like increase the future value of the company, but rather the dividends of the shareholders. And that, at that moment, investing in loss-making startups that you have to consolidate into your P&L and that actually increase the losses or like decrease the profits of the whole ProSieben and Einhorn was for them not the right strategy anymore, which is completely fine, but it led to the fact that they became very careful in investing in doing the majority investments in loss-making businesses.
But is that not the kind of the case of any corporate VC or any corporate incubator? So that at some point the corporate strategy will, take back or reprioritize, and you have the risk of not being in the focus of that corporate anymore?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the thing is like we had the feeling back in the days that the whole ProSieben management board was completely behind our strategy, and also in the long run. Because also when you say it's typical for corporates to do that, it's also typical for corporates to don't change things for a long time. ProSieben did change because of the things that I just described, and so the backing was just not there at some point anymore. And that was just the way how it worked out, and that's the reason why they at some point closed down the incubator. And at this point, ProSieben just invested, and you can really see that in the investment history. They stopped investing majority stakes into small companies, and they took either minority stakes in loss-making companies, so they don't need to consolidate that, or they took majority stakes in profit-making businesses, so they can add the EBITDA to their EBITDA.
So, and for any founders or first-time entrepreneurs who is looking at an accelerator or an incubator as kind of a stepping stone for its growth or its first startup, would you recommend them to move the other direction? And
I completely believe that the time of incubators is over. Like maybe, maybe things come back over time, and there's always a pendulum of like this and that, but I think based on my experience, incubators don't work. And the reason is, I can tell you, and just one little anecdote from Epic, you have a central infrastructure. You have a central IT team, you have a central marketing team, you have a central buying team, and from that central functions, you support all the ventures. So what happens over time when you have founders in these ventures is that all these ventures have a natural tendency that they want to become independent. So at some point, they don't want to pay the invoices of the incubator anymore. They say like, no, I don't want your online marketing support, I have my own online marketing people now.
And that could be the long-term vision of the incubator, because
of course.
At some point you want to have this startup to as
so now comes the point. Absolutely, but once this happens, who pays the invoices of the people in the incubator? So I mean, also the online marketing people want to be paid. Also the IT people want to be paid. And if the ventures don't pay the bills anymore,
you need to find new ventures.
Exactly, but that's not a very nice investment pressure, right? So it means like you need to come up with new ventures all the time just because you need someone to pay your bills. And that's the reason why the psychological tendency goes always toward like, whatever it is, just make a new venture. I don't care about the idea. The main thing is we need someone to cover the invoices. And that's something that is really, really, really bad dynamic. And I don't want to say that we made it very extreme, but the tendency, when we ask ourselves, is this really a good business model or is it an okay business model? I believe that everyone thought like, well, it's an okay business model, but at least they pay the invoices, so let's do it. And that's actually a very...
So it's a sourcing for bad ideas. I'm exaggerating, but...
Yeah, well, but to make a long story short, I think it's not only Epic. I think it's a problem in every incubator that counts on that. And that's the reason why I think...
Who is running on central function?
Yeah, exactly.
Not every incubator has a central function.
Well, but then it's not an incubator anymore.
No,
So then it's more an accelerator.
Yeah.
So if you just give them an office and some people, like mentors, like Techstars, you're right, it doesn't have a central team, but it's also not an incubator.
No, I'm part of the Techstar network, so it's an accelerator.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's then move to Movinga. So basically moving on from Epic, I think also you had the drive to start something new to actually be more operative.
Yep.
And then you jumped into Movinga, which was already a startup which existed with two founders, had already kind of 9 months of start behind them.
Yep.
First, maybe for those who don't know Movinga, what are you actually doing there?
So Movinga is kind of a B2C platform, vertically integrated for connecting customers and moving logistics companies. So basically, if you want to transport your house from here to Berlin or from here to Paris, you go to the website, you can do everything online, and we find the right moving company for you. And it's not only a benefit for you because you can book online, which is like something you could do 5 years ago at Auction, for example, as well. The benefit for you is that the price goes down because we optimize the routing in the background. So, for example, 80% of the moves that we are currently dispatching are optimized, which means the moving company is not doing only the move from here to Berlin, but the moving company has a whole tour. They go from here to Berlin on Monday, they go from Berlin to Hamburg on Tuesday, and then they don't have empty rides, which is actually a very nice side effect. So you reduce the CO2 footprint because you reduce the empty rides that they have on the street and like still create pollution. But on the other hand, it's so much more efficient for the moving companies that they are able to work on much lower cost base, which is then again the reason why the prices are much lower. And out of those lower prices, we can still cut a very nice margin for us.
So Movinga was launched in the beginning of 2015 by Bastian Knudsen and Chris Maslowski.
Yeah.
You joined in November.
Yeah.
How is it to join a co-founding team which is already in place?
Interesting. Well, to be honest, it's very interesting because before I joined Movinga, I had like 3 other ideas that I wanted to do myself. And I had another 2 things where I could have joined a different team. And of course I had my brewery on the side, which I for a long time thought also that might be my full-time job at some point. So all of the many choices I had, Movinga in the beginning was just one of the choices, and per definition, coming from the fashion industry, the moving industry is not that sexy. So I was actually in the beginning a bit skeptical about it. But then, on the other hand, I was also driven by the hype, because it was one of the first business models where I would say I could explain it to my grandmother in 5 minutes, and she would say like, wow, that's cool. And anything else, like online fashion and so on, even that is not as intuitive. It's actually like digitalizing an industry that is not digital at all today. So I was actually like really like also driven by the hype. I saw the great potential in there. I saw the great investors in there, and I joined. But I underestimated how hard it is to join as it's hard for me to say that, but as an older MD, when you have a very young founder team.
How old were they? How old were they?
I think 22 by that time, and I was 35 or 34. So it's like 12 years age difference, and they were best friends. So it's the second thing that makes.
So how did the balance of power play in your favor?
So I mean over time or in the beginning?
At the beginning, and how did you play? How did you manage or didn't manage to actually get a balanced decision-making process? How were the decisions done? Because you were on top 3, so well, I guess if they were two best friends.
Well, let me put it diplomatically, it was not easy, because there was a tendency towards or within the founders to make decisions themselves. Because they were in the worst case 2-to-1 anyways, so when they had like ideas of what they think was right, they most of the time thought it's good enough to decide it between the two of them.
Were they even consulted or informed? Or
for example, yes. Okay. So, and that actually, to be honest, it was a very frustrating
were
experience.
You also a shareholder at that point in time?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I mean, you can imagine if these guys bootstrapped in the beginning and founded the business, and me came 9 months later, I mean, from the balance with the shareholding, it was no comparison. However, it even turned more frustrating over time when they not only make decisions without consulting you, but you know exactly that the decisions are wrong. And based on everything I learned in the 12 years before, I did these things at the Iconic, I know the mistakes people are doing, I know the things that are actually that can go wrong in a startup, which is, as everyone would probably agree, quite a lot of things that can go wrong every single day. But the thing is, I'm completely convinced that experience can help you to not guide through everything, but guide through a lot. And when you have the feeling that this experience is not appreciated, even because people think they can make decisions quickly and without thinking about it, that becomes very frustrating, yes.
And it went wrong?
Well, read the news.
So, in January 2016, you're closing a financing run of $25 million with Index Venture. And then in September 2016, so 9 months later, you almost filed for bankruptcy.
Where did you get the information from? No, I mean it was not that.
Running out of cash. Let's put it.
Well, it was not that dramatic. But the thing is, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the company grew too fast. And I think, to be honest, the whole company got into a frenzy because, you know, like we came start of the year, we got 25 million, Index was investing, so it was the next big thing on the Berlin startup scene, and everyone was completely hyping the startup. And I remember people telling me on parties, wow, that will be the next unicorn, and you will have like 2 billion of revenues within 1 year. And I already thought, like back in the days, maybe it's heating a bit up too much, and that's what happened basically. It's like it happened that the founders, against some advice and because it was their business more or less, they did some decisions to even foster that growth further. And at the end of the day, they had to realize that they might have some wrong decisions, and that maybe this growth was overwhelming them. And then they also did some decisions that they should have done differently, and they didn't consult anyone. And that's the reason why they left the company.
And for example, can you give us a few elements what was not properly done or professionally done?
I can give general advice to founders. One advice I would give to founders is, if you're a unit economic negative in your markets, don't open a new market. So that's number one. If your IT platform is not ready yet to scale, don't think that hiring 100 people to do the work manually will help you to scale. yeah, that's probably the two things that I can share straight away that I would advise to do differently.
What about cash collection from your customers?
Well, that's also one point. At the end of the day, if you don't have a good CFO, which I think is the basic thing of every good company you need to have, and you have people who think like the top line is the most important thing, these people sometimes tend to forget that the top line is the top line, but at the end what counts is what hangs in the bank account.
Yeah, cash.
And that combined with people who didn't have that much insight into the business to be able to differentiate between the two things, between top line and between what lands on your bank account, has caused some trouble.
And so what did you actually do when you figured out that these processes were not in place, that you were scaling too fast, opening new countries on negative unit economics? What do you do, especially when you have kind of the majority against you?
It's really the hot chair here right now, isn't it?
You told me to ask you the tough questions.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, the only thing you do is you have a lot of discussions. You have discussions with the founders, you have discussions with everyone who's involved. At the end of the day, and it's a very diplomatic answer right now, but what else shall I say? You try to find the right solution, and you have to like reconsider and analyze how far you are in that process already, and what needs to be done to change things for the better, and then just take the consequences. And in that sense, it led to the fact that we had a change in management, that we closed our countries, that unfortunately we had to lay off a lot of people, which was a very sad day for the company. But at the end of the day, to make the company survive, you do what you got to do.
So, and how do you motivate the people that are still, working with you, knowing that their funding team is kind of gone, that you're restructuring the business, their colleagues are being fired? So how do you motivate them to say, okay, we're going to turn this around and please kind of stay because we're going to build this back into something big?
I think, first of all, it's definitely not an easy challenge. And I think many people underestimate what this does to the company, also in terms of trust. So you always have in startups what I always call the fraternal culture. So it means you as a boss or as a founder, instead of being the paternal, like the boss, the father type, you're more the older brother type. So it means you basically, as a founder, especially in companies where the people grow with you, you build up a lot of trust between you and your employees. The moment when something like this happens, all the trust goes. I felt that when I realized before the big day, I call it, or the Black Friday, some people call it, people invite me for lunch and say like, hey, there's a group lunch, come by, come along. And after that, it didn't happen anymore. So that was a sign for me, okay, there is like a lack of trust in this company now. And to be very honest, it was a very tough time because everyone was wondering, okay, what does it mean? I mean, I think every startup in the world goes through a phase of growth and then through a phase of correction. Depending on how long you drag this phase of growth and how extreme you do it, the stronger is the phase of correction. Movinga did something that was unheard of before in terms of like fast growth and like extreme growth. And that's the reason why this moment of correction was very strong. And I think that many companies fail at that moment. If that phase of correction is that strong, there's a lot of companies that go down. And I think what helped me and what also helped the people to stay on board and stay motivated is that the management team was always, as a whole, staying positive. And not positive in terms of like, hey, everything is fine, but rather positive in terms of like, we all know that this business model will come sooner or later, and if we die, there will someone else be doing it. And if we die later, there will still be someone doing it. There's no way that the moving industry will stay offline. There's for no industry any way that any industry will stay offline. And the moving industry is no exception. And that's the reason why this strong belief, like someone has to do it, someone has to bring this industry online, and there's a value of our business, and we see the economics of this business. That was actually, even though it's a very rational economic driver, but I think that's what held the company together in the beginning of this phase, to make sure, like saying like, hey, there's a lot of shit that happened, but at the end of the day, we know that we're doing the right thing.
And I think you also brought together a new management team on board, Jochen and Christoph,
Yeah.
with kind of very high complementary skills, with very good background that provides also credibility into the fact that you really want to turn this company around. So do you think that having the management backup and this strong conviction helped as well? Also helped towards your investors?
Yeah. It was definitely good at that phase to have people who have experience. So Jochen, by that time, was the right hand of the CFO of Zalando, and Christoph was like 7 years at BCG. So both of them had a lot of experience. And even though if I'm not a friend of judging people by age, it certainly helped to not have too young people there anymore in the management, but rather people who have experience and are seasoned. Of course it helped. Of course it helped, but also it brought a new professionalism to the company, because instead of like just living from one day to the other and see what the day brings and like just like thinking about one KPI at a time, you suddenly had a team together that actually were very complementary, and that all three actually had a very good view on what needs to happen per department to make this company good again. And these fresh faces, together with the right approach of like how to change things and a clear roadmap on what we need to change, was actually the main driver of our investors keeping the trust in the company.
So you're restructuring, meaning you're focusing on...
I don't like the word restructuring.
Turning around?
Reshifting the focus.
Pivoting?
No, it wasn't a pivot. The pivot is something else.
So reshifting
the focus, yeah.
Okay, by focusing on unit economics, focusing on tech, building up the tech so that it's scalable, focusing on quality, choosing your partners, i.e. the moving companies. You have a new management team on board. So
I mean, if you really bring it down, it's really tech. Really, I mean, this business model can only work if you have a scalable tech platform behind, because if you just do the same like moving companies, just in one location, not in several locations, it doesn't add value to the market. So it was really tech.
So
it was
meaning automation of the entire process, and having a scalable server and systems behind.
And I can tell you, like 1.5 years ago, to dispatch one move, like to actually like make sure if you book a move with us, we find the moving company and the moving company knows what to do. It involved 7 different people in the company before the move was dispatched. Today, it's only one person in the whole company who does all dispatching, just because the tech product is doing everything. So about 1 month ago, we launched a product called automated dispatching. So it means now 60% of the moves are not being touched by a human at all anymore. So the sales agent is like still consulting the customer if the customer wants, but once the move is booked in, it goes straight to the moving company. We accept or we see which moving company is best. We actually do the routing, we offer it, the moving company accepts, boom, done.
Did you get inspired, or did you talk to your friends at Flixbus?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
So actually connecting with other founders which might have a different business or scope, but the same underlying tech?
To be honest, Flixbus is very similar to Movinga. It's a different industry, but exactly the same thing. The average bus driver is very similar to the average moving partner, and the average middle-sized bus company is very similar culturally to the average middle-sized moving company.
And you're providing kind of the same service to them, right? Marketing.
Yeah. So I mean, to be honest, Flixbus started something last year called Flixbus Charter, where you can charter the buses. That's even more similar to Movinga than the routing service, but it's very similar. And Jochen and Andre are amazing founders. I really like them, what they did with the company, and we also did both their moves recently. And now since last month, we do all the moves for Flixbus. So whenever employees of Flixbus move, we do the moves for them. So it has been a very cool relationship.
That's the strong BCG fraternity.
Yeah, true. Somehow.
Jovan was actually sitting here on the first event of Startup Grind Munich. Okay, so now basically you're back into the positive numbers. What's your kind of revenue at this point in time?
Well, let's say it's...
Are you back on the growth?
I mean, to be honest, like it's a bit of a seasonal business. So if I take this month and count it on the year, it's probably not the right number. But we will land somewhere between 30 and 40 million this year if we just continue to do how we are. However, we have some things in the pipeline, especially because you see the market is consolidating a bit right now.
Really?
That might lead to the fact that we grow a bit faster. But
And can you tell us a little bit about this, actually? What's next?
What exactly do you mean?
I don't know. I just read an article, was it beginning of the week? About Move24?
Yeah?
What's happening with them?
Well, you have to ask them.
I thought you discussed with them quite often.
No, I mean, only because you're professionally competing doesn't mean you don't talk besides the business. And of course, we talk with them quite a lot. Also, if it makes sense, because especially just when we mentioned Flixbus and my Fernbus, to actually do something similar with them. It at the end never worked out due to several reasons that we don't need to go into details now. And of course, I mean, now where they actually went out of business, of course we keep talking and see if it makes sense to do something together. But there's nothing detailed we can talk about right now.
But is that, do you think that your market is a winner-takes-all market?
No, the market is too big for that. So I mean, imagine, we have a market share. So we are by revenue, the biggest German moving company, but our market share is less than 0.3% of the market. So with almost 20,000 companies in the German market that somehow do moves, the market is huge. And the interesting thing is, the only thing where it could go into a winner-takes-all market is that only a fraction of that market is used to book online so far. So if you have two players that compete with a small fraction of people who book online, that can become there can be a bit of an overlap at some point. But to be honest, everyone always asks me that, but we ask all our people hey, do you have competing offers when we talk to them? And there was only a small fraction who said yeah, we have the same offer by Move24, so we have to decide either Movinga or Move24. Really rare. So let's really imagine is the fisher that's fishing in Spain competing with the fisherman that's fishing in Florida? No. The lake is too big for that.
You could argue that you're creating a new market, i.e. those that were moving by themselves that are now moving through you because it's cheaper, more convenient, etc. And then you're also moving an entire market digital.
Yeah.
And as soon as you do this, the fragmentation will kind of disappear.
And I think, to be honest, the competition between us and Move was good in the sense that we both work towards digitalizing the market. Because they did TV, we did online, they did online. So the fact that now two companies who are actually offering digital moving experience definitely helped to create that segment. But it was not necessarily that it was a winner-takes-all market. So it's the same maybe Lieferando and Lieferheld is a bad example, but I would always say of course it's better to have just one. Saying this as being the one. but I wouldn't say that the competition was necessarily not good for any of the companies.
And what about international expansion? And you right now in France and in Austria. Any other countries that you're looking at?
We're also in Germany.
Yeah, of course, but international expansion outside of Germany.
Okay. So now we're looking at markets. Maybe something in Scandinavia, maybe something in between France and Germany, which are our strongest markets right now. So there are a lot of options, but there are so many things going on now, and there are so many options still also in France and Germany on the table, that we, together with our investors, will carefully think about what step might make most sense now. So we are actually kind of open for that, but we're looking at several options right now. We of course decide for the ones that we believe have the highest return on investment.
And would you buy, or would you start from scratch if you were to open a new market?
Theoretically, both is possible. There are not many models like ours, so that's the reason why if you would ask me who to buy in Spain, for example, there wouldn't be probably many options. You could buy all classifieds websites, or you can do price comparison engines, you can buy them. But then at the end, what are you buying? It's not per se a repeat business, a repeat customer business, which leads to the fact that if you buy something, it's the partner base and the organic traffic if it's an old company already. And yeah, maybe we look at it when we go to a new market, but it's not the priority.
In the US? I heard that you looked at it before. Is that still on the roadmap?
The US is a very attractive market. Just to give you an example, the moving market of the US is bigger than the moving market of the rest of the world outside the US. So it's basically 60% of the global market for moving are the US. And I mean, if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. It's a very federal country, so you have a lot of different hubs from Atlanta to San Francisco to LA to New York. Between these hubs are huge distances. And of course, as everyone knows, is actually that in the US, people are much more mobile than they are in Germany. So I mean, imagine like 10 years ago, the average German moved every 8 years. Now it's every 4 to 5 years. So also the market in Germany is growing, similar to France. But in the US, it's almost every 1.5 years. So you can imagine like 300 million people moving every 1.5 years with an average moving distance of like 4,000 kilometers. It's different than Germany, where you have 80 million people moving every 5 years with an average distance of 100 kilometers.
And in terms of next steps, are also looking at the product itself. Are you trying to also move into the kind of the value that you provide to the moving companies, to the consumer, to extend your offering?
I mean, we look at it.
Why?
Yeah. So we look at many different things. I mean, the difference between us and a marketplace is, and I don't really, whenever someone calls us marketplace, I'm really getting annoyed by that, because a marketplace for me is you connect two parties, you get a commission, the parties do their own things, and that's it. Movinga, as being vertically integrated, is you organize the whole thing, the customer is your contract partner, we organize everything, and that's the reason why we deserve a higher margin. So if you consequently think about this model of what it means and where this is going, of course it means you try to integrate deeper and deeper and deeper, because one of the traditional shortfalls in such a model is that you don't have the control that you would want over your suppliers. And the only way how you can actually have a better control and a better grip on these suppliers is vertically integrating deeper, and that's a very bad word to say, but make them more depending on you. And that's, for example, by giving them the software to manage their own business. Like we are working on it since a long time on an ERP software for the moving industry. We have a first version, movers are already using it. We work on mobile apps, we work on a lot of things to actually integrate them even deeper.
So
and the automate
to get them like sticky to the product.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, I mean, at the end, to digitalize the whole process further. So, for example, one thing that we are doing now, and that based on these bundles and tours I was mentioning, with this automated dispatching, we give the moves directly to the moving company. So they don't even have to accept the move anymore. We just know that they have a truck ready, and we know that they have a team ready. And we say the moment the customer books, we say, you do the move. So what it means is also that based on the capacity that we know, we could offer customers different prices based on the day. So for example, what you know when you book a price or when you book a flight at Lufthansa.de, you have like a little schedule, say like, okay, if I take Friday morning at 8 a.m., the price is 400 euros. But if I take Friday afternoon at 4 p.m., the price is much lower. So you have a grid of where you see based on capacity, how much will it cost. And that's something that we're also doing right now to really integrate, and we have this grid, at least based on the customer partners that we use for auto dispatching. And that is something that really makes this whole process much more digital, because at the end of the day, the moving company needs to do nothing else but driving from A to B and loading and unloading. Everything else we do. We do the marketing, we do the finance, we do the administrative things for them, we do the pricing, we do the after sales, we do the customer service. So at the end of the day, the things that the moving company doesn't like to do anyways, we are doing for them. And that's the reason why over time we will still increase our margins, but also means that somehow we make them more dependent on us, yes.
And they can focus on their core business, which is
exactly.
driving.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about your investors. And we have one in the room, so let's be careful. You yourself an investor as well, you're a business angel. What would you recommend to entrepreneurs when they approach investors? How to kind of talk to them and approach them, and how to choose kind of the perfect investor? What are the key elements?
There's a lot of different questions already.
Or let's put it that way, based on your experience, is there any investor you regret to have taken on board, or is there any investor that you're really happy because they were providing some added value? And what is this?
Wow, it's such a it's such a difficult question to answer, because every investor is different. Every investor brings different things to the table, and every investor wants to hear different things. So when Movinga had this kind of like, let's call it little ditch, before actually we went fundraising again, one of the things I realized is there are some investors that are very tech driven. They almost don't care about your unit economics, they don't care about your revenues, they just say like, look, as long as you have a good tech product, everything else will come automatically. The next investor says like, look, if you have tech or no, I don't care, as long as you make profits, that's the most important thing for me. The next one says, look, I neither care about profits, nor do I care about the tech. As long as you're growing and have a cool story, that's what I care about. So having said that, the personality of the founder and what he wants to achieve with his business needs to match the DNA of the investor. And that's the reason why, if you, for example, are like a guy who thinks like, wow, I need someone who really helps me to build the coolest tech product in the world, I would probably recommend a different investor than if you would say like, look, I have this thing, it's not very technical, but it's super high margin. So that's the reason why it's hard to say to actually like go to which investor I have to go. I think we have a very good board of investors. I'm very happy with everyone who's invested in Movinga, Early Bird, Rocket, our new ones, the Stringman family here from Munich. So they all bring their good things to the table, and I'm very happy about that.
And you can focus on your DNA, which is fitting with their expectations, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, my DNA is tech and building a brand. And that's actually which is very much supported by the board, because at the end of the day we proved over the last 2 years that tech improvements automatically lead to margin improvements and automatically lead to growth, because it makes it scalable, and that's the reason why I hope our investors are happy.
So you satisfy the three objectives,
yeah.
tech, profit and growth.
And then you ask as well like how to approach investors. So I mean, I'm a mentor as well at Techstars, and what I always see where actually very many founders still have shortfalls is that they are, that is now the counter of what I just said, that they are somehow so tech, and that's what I mentioned at the beginning, that they forget the customer about it. And what I actually love, and it was the first time I saw that probably 8 years ago in a pitch deck in the US, is really the question, what is the problem? And what are you solving, and how do you solve it? And that actually almost explains everything else. If there's no problem that you want to solve, maybe you shouldn't do your business. If you actually like want to solve something, or if you actually like have a problem but you're not fully solving it, but you have an idea of what to do, maybe it's not the right thing to do. So, but when you approach an investor, always have in mind what's the problem in the market, how do you solve it, and then what are the next steps in like achieving that goal. And I think if you have that ready, and if these are like the first 5 sentences you give to a new investor, that's the perfect way to approach it.
Is that the way to get you as an investor?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
although I have to say, like, I love brands. That's the reason why I invested in Einhorn as well. I just love cool founder teams.
What is Einhorn? Because I'm not sure everyone knows. Does everyone know what Einhorn is? So
Einhorn is it's an organic and vegan condom brand from Berlin, based by 2 crazy founders who want to change the world for the better. And they had this idea of condoms being super high margin products, being normally produced under very bad circumstances for really cheap money. And they wanted to change that, and they actually founded their own rubber collective in Malaysia. And with that, they actually found like a producer who actually turned this rubber into condoms. And they actually refinance this collective by giving them money to actually found schools for their workers. And they say also every profit they make, they're already profitable, every profit they make, 50% they give back to the community. And that, I think, was a really, really cool project, because condoms have incredibly high margin. You wouldn't believe that. I mean, it's less than 1 cent, including the packaging to produce them, but you sell them for like €5, whatever it is, depending on the packaging size.
With a brand like Einhorn, a little bit more than €5.
Yeah, of course it's a bit more expensive. Yeah, but I mean, as I said, they also like, first of all, it's very small volumes. That's the reason why, of course, the production costs are higher. And then secondly, they only use certified workers and certified rubber. That's the reason why, of course, they need to be more expensive.
So if anyone has a very cool funding team and a brand, then they should approach you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only brands. I also love EdTech. So with CrossEngage, and for example, it's a very good example of a cool EdTech project. So to be honest, I'm very opportunistic. When I like founding teams and when I like the idea, I'm doing it. But the idea is it has to solve a problem. And that's, I think, again, the most important thing besides the founding team.
Okay, my last question. You're based in Berlin. We here are in Munich.
Yeah.
What do you think we should improve here in Munich to be put on the map for entrepreneurs, for startups, for investors?
Come to Berlin.
I
don't know. I'm not that much of an extremist. Well, I think actually we're on a very good track. I know that a few years ago everyone said like, look, Berlin's focus is more e-commerce and Munich's focus is more tech, and like in engineering, combining engineering startups. I don't really know if that's really the right thing to differentiate and to be up to speed. But I think, for example, if Berlin is the number 1 in Germany, Munich is clearly the number 2, and then with a huge distance is probably Hamburg. And I think the Munich startup ecosystem is doing a lot of things right. And I think actually, like what I said, the downside of Berlin is that some founders who go to Berlin for the first time and want to found something, they completely get lost because events like this are 5 times every day per week. They don't even know where to go to, and in their insecurity they go to everything. And that actually is a nice thing that you have in Berlin, so we have a community, but the downside is that you also can get lost in that community. And I think having that selectively and having good events and doing things like that and have like a community of mentors and helping each other and have like regular meetups is something that's very helpful. And I think what helped Berlin the most over time was to have these second generation founders. So you have the Florian Heinemanns who once earned money. They have a lot of money now, and then they help the next generation of founders coming up by giving them money in private. But you have a lot of people there in Berlin, most of them coming from the Rocket environment, because they got some money with Rocket by successful exits, maybe eDarling, Zalando, and so on. And they get back to the founders, and that's something that really helped Berlin accelerate to where they are. And I think Munich is on a very good way to do that.
So we need more successful exits.
Exactly, yeah. That's always the presentation.
We have some investors here.
Yeah,
I think the money is.
It's actually funny that I think most of the VCs are even here and not in Berlin. So
then they're opening offices in Berlin, some of them. Thanks a lot.